How did John Dewey change education? That's what we're going to look at in this episode of the School Reformers series. John Dewey was a philosopher who profoundly changed our thinking about education. He insisted that students learn by doing, that they take an active role in their learning rather than being passive recipients of information. And he had some other ideas that I think are also very important. So let's get into it. Dewey was born in 1859 and died in 1952, so he lived a very long life. He was born in Vermont, but his family moved to Illinois when he was 4 years old. He went to Amherst College and then did graduate work at the University of Berlin and Johns Hopkins University. And in 1886, he became head of the philosophy department at the University of Michigan. So why should we care about this guy? Why is he important? Well, first of all, he's an American classic. His ideas about democracy and education are absolutely central to our thinking today. And he has been very influential in curriculum development, especially in social studies. But Dewey is most famous for his theory of learning. He said that the way we teach children is completely wrong. It hasn't changed since the Middle Ages, where we sit them down in rows and make them memorize and recite. We have them passively listen to us talk. We make them passively read textbooks. This is all completely antiquated, he says. Children are not empty vessels to be filled by teachers. They are active agents in the construction of knowledge. They need to be involved in interesting and challenging projects that will motivate them to learn. And they need to learn how to solve problems, not just memorize facts and procedures. Now, before we go further, I want to say that Dewey didn't hate facts or procedures, and he didn't think that memorization was a bad thing. If facts and procedures are useful, and if memorization helps students to achieve important ends, then it's fine with him. The problem is that when we organize schools around rote memorization and recitation, when we make these passive activities the main business of school, then we are doing students a disservice because we are not helping them become active problem solvers. And Dewey thought that this was the ultimate goal of education, that we help students become problem solvers, people who can deal with novel situations, people who can take the initiative, who can think creatively, who can use knowledge flexibly. And the way we do that, according to Dewey, is by giving students challenging projects that require them to use their creativity, their intelligence, their reasoning abilities to grapple with real problems. Problem solving is at the heart of intelligence, he thought. Learning is a process of solving problems, and intelligence itself is nothing more than the ability to solve problems. But what kind of problems should students be solving? How does this work in practice? Well, here is where Dewey's ideas get really interesting. He thought that there were certain general ways of thinking that we should try to instill in our students. These are the habits of the mind, and they include things like the ability to observe, to question, to hypothesize, to verify, to think systematically, to think logically, to think creatively, to see the relationships between things. And we cultivate these habits of the mind by giving students projects that challenge them to use these ways of thinking. So, for example, let's say we want to help students develop their powers of observation. We don't do that by lecturing them about observation or having them memorize definitions of observation. We give them an opportunity to observe something. Maybe they have to go outside and describe what they see, or maybe they have to watch a short video clip and describe what they see. And in doing so, they develop their observational skills. Now, of course, observation isn't everything. We want them to do more than simply observe. We want them to interpret what they observe. We want them to explain it, to relate it to other things they know. So their project might be to not only observe something, but to prepare a report about what they observed. They might have to interview people. They might have to read background materials. They might have to gather data from various sources and then pull it all together in some kind of coherent presentation. And through this process, they develop the habit of the mind we call interpretation. Or let's say we want to help students develop their powers of logic. We don't do that by lecturing them about logic or having them memorize rules of logic. We give them a logical puzzle to solve. Maybe it's a syllogism, maybe it's a logic grid, maybe it's a formal debate. They have to figure out how to use logic to solve the problem, and in doing so, they develop their logical skills. Now, this may sound simple, but it is actually quite powerful, this idea that we can develop the habits of the mind by giving students challenging projects. It puts the onus on students to figure things out. It makes them active learners rather than passive recipients. And it allows them to develop these powerful ways of thinking in a context that has meaning for them. It's not just abstract rules and principles. It's not just memorizing facts, it's learning how to use knowledge and skills in meaningful contexts. Okay, so that's the basic idea behind Dewey's theory of learning. But he had some other ideas that I think are also very important. For example, Dewey was a strong advocate of experiential learning. He believed that students learn best by doing, by getting hands-on experience. This is why he was a proponent of student-centered classrooms, where students are actively engaged in their learning, rather than sitting passively listening to a teacher talk. Dewey was also a proponent of progressive education. He believed that schools should be a place where students can explore their interests and where they can learn by doing things that are relevant to their lives. And he was a strong critic of what he called the overgrading system, which he thought was a major obstacle to good teaching and learning. He believed that we should stop grading students so much and instead focus on helping them learn. Finally, Dewey was a strong believer in the importance of the arts in education. He believed that the arts can help students develop their creativity and their ability to appreciate beauty. And he was a critic of what he called the tyranny of efficiency, which he thought was leading to a narrow focus on science and technology in education at the expense of the arts. So those are some of the ways that John Dewey changed education. His ideas have been hugely influential in shaping modern educational thought and practice, and I believe that his ideas are more relevant today than ever before. In an age when many educators are calling for a return to basics, a focus on traditional subjects like reading, writing, and arithmetic, we should remember that Dewey's ideas are also about returning to basics. He was a strong believer in the importance of these traditional subjects, but he also believed that they should be taught in a way that is relevant and engaging for students. For example, Dewey was a critic of the way that reading was being taught in his day. He believed that students were being taught to read by memorizing rules and then practicing on meaningless texts. Instead, he advocated for a more holistic approach to reading instruction, one that teaches students to read for meaning and to use reading as a tool for learning. Likewise, Dewey was a critic of the way that math was being taught in his day. He believed that students were being taught to memorize procedures without understanding the underlying concepts. Instead, he advocated for a more conceptual approach to math instruction, one that helps students see the beauty and power of mathematics and to use it to solve real-world problems. And this brings me to one of the most important lessons we can learn from Dewey. He reminds us that education is not just about teaching facts and procedures. It's about teaching students how to think, how to solve problems, and how to use knowledge and skills in meaningful contexts. It's about helping students become creative, productive, and engaged citizens. As educators, we have the privilege of helping young people develop the habits of the mind that will allow them to lead fulfilling lives and to make a difference in the world. And we can do that by giving students challenging projects that challenge them to use these habits of the mind. Education is not about filling students with information. It's about helping them become active, engaged learners who can think critically, solve problems, and make a difference in the world. Those are some of the ways that John Dewey changed education. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you learned something new. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to know more about John Dewey or other important figures in educational history, check out the links in the description. Thanks for watching.